If HOA were a game, Karen always believed she played white and made the first move. But this time, she trapped herself into checkmate by overestimating her authority. She pressed her so-called universal access device against my gate as though she were unlocking a janitor's closet. Nothing happened. Frustrated, she dialed the police, shouting that I was blocking a standard inspection. And me, I kept quiet, just made a brief call to dispatch. It's funny how someone like Karina, who'd been barking orders into her earpiece moments earlier, went completely silent once she heard who'd confirmed my request. So, who did I call? And why did that single conversation put a sudden stop to all HOA inspections? You'll see. The gentle hum of my home office equipment was the only sound filling my afternoon until an unfamiliar electronic beep cut through the calm. It wasn't the usual delivery alert or neighbor's car alarm, but something more persistent and definitely unauthorized. I glanced up from my triple monitor setup, where streams of security code scrolled down endlessly. Years spent designing and maintaining the city's emergency network had trained me to instantly spot the difference between genuine system alerts and attempts that didn't belong. Outside, I saw her, Karen Whitfield. She stood at my gate like a general inspecting a newly claimed prize, her carefully styled blonde hair glinting under the sun. In her hand, a small electronic device tapped at my smart lock, triggering more insistent beeps. Clad in her signature white blazer and pearls, Karen always dressed as if authority could be sewn into fabric. Her lips moved rapidly as she spoke into her headset, and even from a distance, I could see the smug satisfaction growing on her face. I had been expecting this day for a while, since Karen had crowned herself digitization coordinator of Pine Ridge Estates HOA. She'd become bolder with every pass through the neighborhood. Complaints had quietly circulated among neighbors through group chats and quick talks over fences. Mrs. Chen 2 blocks over mentioned Karen appeared at her door, wielding some scanning device and insisting she needed to verify compliance with newly updated smart home regulations. The Johnsons shared a similar story, paired with Karen's claim that her gadget gave her sweeping rights to access private systems. I saved my work and walked toward the door, taking my time to watch Karen's approach. She held the device to different parts of my gate's locking mechanism, each failed attempt making her jabs at the screen sharper and her scowl deeper. Little did she know, I'd built this home security system myself, borrowing the same secure protocols I helped develop for city emergency services. Each failed probe she made was already logged, time-stamped, and flagged for analysis. Afternoon, Karen, I called as I reached the gate, staying just far enough away to keep my cameras trained on us. Having trouble with the system? She turned, and for the briefest instant, there was a flicker of embarrassment before she reset her expression into practiced authority. Marcus Rodriguez, perfect timing, she said smoothly. I'm conducting a routine digital compliance check as required by our updated community rules. This device grants authorized access to every smart home in Pine Ridge for inspection purposes. I nodded, genuinely curious. That's interesting, I replied. Could I see the paperwork authorizing that device? I'd love to learn how it works with private security networks. My question was polite, but I already had a strong suspicion about what the answer would be. Karen's confident smile wavered for a fraction of a second. The authorization is integrated into the system itself, she replied. The HOA board invested heavily in this technology so we could oversee everything more efficiently. Now, if you'll just let me finish this scan, it'll be quick. I appreciate the effort, I said, but standard procedure requires documentation first. Also, I gestured to the tiny LED glowing on her earpiece. Are you live streaming this? Her eyes lit up with satisfaction. As a matter of fact, yes. Transparency is vital, don't you think? Homeowners deserve to see how certain residents react when we're only trying to keep property values and safety intact. Into her camera, she added, this is Karen Whitfield, HOA president, currently facing an uncooperative homeowner during a routine inspection. I looked directly into her phone camera. Karen, I'm not refusing, I said calmly. I'm simply asking to verify credentials before you access my private systems. I'm sure anyone watching would understand a homeowner wanting to confirm paperwork. The device in her hand beeped again, and I noticed her fingers tighten around it. My experience told me what I needed to know. The irregular beeps, the repeated attempts, The absence of standard authentication signs the device was trying to brute force its way in, not properly connect. It was becoming obvious. Whatever Karen had brought wasn't an officially approved HOA tool. "The paperwork's on file at the HOA office," she snapped, frustration rising. Every homeowner was informed of these updates. If you chose not to review them, that's on you. I pulled out my phone and opened the HOA bylaws I downloaded when I moved in. "Karen, I've read every document. Section 73 specifically states property inspections require 48 hours written notice and must be done during reasonable hours. A broken bar with homeowner consent or a court order," I finished. "And I don't remember receiving any written notice." On her phone screen, I noticed the number of viewers on her live stream ticking upward. Comments streamed in, some praising her dedication to transparency, while others began echoing the questions I was asking about proper procedure and homeowners' rights. "And another thing," I added, nodding toward her device. "That scanner you're using seems more like it's trying to clone or feed credentials rather than legitimately interface with my system. As someone who works in cybersecurity, I should tell you that what you're doing could potentially fall under federal computer fraud violations." Karen's face flushed deep red, and the calm, polished persona she'd carefully worn started to crack. "How dare you accuse me of something illegal? I am the HOA president. I have every right to check for compliance. This device was purchased specifically for official HOA inspections." The scanner in her hand let out one last annoyed beep before its screen flickered and went black. Karen stared at it, pressing the power button harder each time, her frustration rising. "You know what?" she snapped. "I've tried to handle this professionally, but you're clearly determined to block legitimate HOA business. Fine, I'm calling 911 right now to report you for obstruction." "Go ahead, Karen," I said calmly. "I think you'll find the conversation a broken bar enlightening." She cut the live stream with a sharp flick of her thumb and started dialing. Even her carefully manicured fingers shook slightly as she lifted the phone to her ear, silently practicing what she'd say. While we stood there under the fading afternoon sun, I found myself almost curious to see how this would play out. Karen truly had no clue what she was about to walk into. 911, "What's your emergency?" came a clear, professional voice from her speaker. It was immediately familiar. Jenny Walsh, the city dispatch supervisor and my younger sister, who'd been running the afternoon shift for 3 years. Karen straightened up, sliding back into her official tone. "Yes, this is Karen Whitfield, president of Pine Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. I'm reporting a resident who's actively interfering with an official HOA inspection. The address is 1247 Maple Ridge Drive. He's refusing to let me conduct a required compliance check." She shot me a look of victory, confident the call would end things in her favor. "The homeowner is being deliberately obstructive and may be violating HOA regulations," she added for effect. Jenny's reply was exactly what I'd hoped for. "Ma'am, can you clarify what type of inspection this is? Are you representing a city department, county agency, or a private organization?" Karen hesitated, clearly caught off guard by the question. "I am the HOA president," she repeated, her voice tightening. "I have authority to inspect properties within our community. His refusal is interfering with official business." "I understand, ma'am," Jenny replied, still sounding perfectly calm. "I'll need to verify a few details. Would you mind holding for a moment?" Her tone shifted slightly in a way I recognized. She was already searching internal databases. "Also, is the homeowner there and willing to speak with dispatch?" Karen's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Why do you need to speak with him? I'm the one making the report." But I stepped closer, hand outstretched. "Karen, I'd be glad to explain directly. After all, transparency is what you're promoting, right?" She pulled the phone to her chest defensively. "Number, you just twist things around and make it look like I'm the problem." Jenny's voice came through the speaker again. "Sir, if you're there, I'd like to hear your side. It's standard for property disputes." I met Karen's glare head on. "Unless you have something to hide, I can't see why you'd object." For a moment, I saw the calculation behind her eyes. Refusing now would completely undermine her transparency message. With a stiff motion, she handed me the phone. "Jenny, this is Marcus Rodriguez. I am the homeowner," I began, keeping my tone steady and professional. making no mention of our family connection. Miss Whitfield arrived at my property today carrying an electronic device. She claimed it gave her authority to access my private security system without prior notice or proper documentation. When I asked to see authorization, she became upset. "Mr. Rodriguez, can you describe the device she was using?" Jenny asked, her voice still neutral, though I could hear the undercurrent of intent as she was already evaluating risk. "It looked like an RFID cloning tool," I explained. "From its behavior, it seemed designed to force access rather than communicate legitimately with the system. The way it kept sending repeat signals fits a brute force attempt." I saw Karen's expression pale as I spoke, the weight of what I was saying sinking in. She hadn't expected me to understand or to be able to explain it so clearly. After a pause, Jenny answered, "Mr. Rodriguez, given what you've described and after checking our systems, I'll need to create an incident report. Could you please confirm your professional background?" This was the moment I'd been waiting for. "I'm a cybersecurity engineer with the city's Emergency Services Department. Authorization code Alpha 77 Delta." The silence that followed was heavy. Karen stared at me, realization dawning on her face as the true implications of her actions began to settle in. Jenny's voice came back on the line, now carrying a distinctly firmer tone. "Confirmed. Mr. Rodriguez, I see your clearance level in our system. Given the attempted unauthorized access, I'm initiating protective protocols immediately." "What does that mean?" Karen's voice cracked, her confidence starting to falter as the reality of the situation sank in. Jenny kept her tone crisp and official. "Ma'am, based on the homeowner's technical assessment and verified credentials, I'm issuing a temporary suspension order. This applies to all unauthorized electronic access attempts in the affected area. I'm also obligated to notify relevant departments regarding possible violations of federal computer fraud statutes." I stepped closer so my voice would be clear over the phone. "Jenny, please implement an immediate lockdown of all unauthorized smart access devices within a 500-meter radius. Authorization code Alpha 77 Delta." There was a brief pause as Jenny processed the command. "Confirmed, Marcus. Lockdown protocol now active." Almost instantly, Karen's device gave a sharp electronic chirp. The screen flashed red, then went completely black. She stared at it, pressing the power button over and over in rising panic. "What did you do? Why isn't it turning back on?" "Standard security protocol," I explained calmly. "When an unauthorized device is detected near critical systems, it's quarantined to prevent a potential breach." Jenny's voice returned, authoritative and final. "Miss Whitfield, you are required to cease all inspection activities until your legal authority is verified. Any further attempts to access private property or systems without documentation may result in criminal charges." Karen's composure collapsed further, and her words came out strained. "This is absurd. I am the HOA president. I have every right to conduct inspections." But her protest sounded weak now, especially with her equipment completely dead. Jenny spoke one last time, sealing the matter. "Ma'am, HOA authority is limited to civil enforcement and must follow proper legal procedures. What you've described is an attempted unauthorized access to private computer systems. That's a federal matter." Karen stood frozen, clutching the dead device like a broken shield, trying to process how what began as a routine inspection had escalated into a potential federal crime. And this was only the beginning. "Now, Karen," I said quietly, "about those authorization documents you mentioned." She stayed rooted on my driveway, the earlier confidence gone, her perfectly styled hair now slightly out of place, her expression teetering between panic and denial. "There's a broken bar, this can't be happening," she muttered, jabbing at her device again. "That equipment cost the HOA $15,000. It can't just stop working because you said some magic words over the phone." She shot me a look that mixed desperation with accusation. "What is this, Marcus? Some kind of scam? Did you hack my device?" I calmly pulled out my phone, opened the camera app, and spoke evenly. "Actually, Karen, since you were so eager to live stream earlier in the name of transparency, I think the community deserves to see what's really happening. May I?" Before she could answer, I started a Facebook live stream, holding the phone so it captured both of us. "Good afternoon, Pine Ridge residents," I said into the camera. "This is Marcus Rodriguez at 1247 Maple Ridge Drive. I'm here with HOA President Karen Whitfield, who just tried to access my private property using what appears to be an illegal electronic device. I tilted my phone to show the viewers her dead equipment. Miss Whitfield claimed this device gave her authority to access any smart home system in our neighborhood without homeowner consent or proper documentation. Karen's face turned crimson. You can't just live stream me without my permission. This is harassment. Her words rang hollow, especially given her earlier broadcast. Comments started pouring in. I recognized names from the neighborhood, and the viewer count was jumping. Mrs. Chen, our neighbor, had joined and was already typing furiously. Karen, you set the precedent for transparency in HOA business today. I kept my voice calm and measured. I'm simply following your lead. Karen, now, about those authorization documents you mentioned. A broken bar turning slightly back to the camera. I added, for those just joining, Miss Whitfield hasn't produced any legal documentation giving her authority to access private property or electronic systems. At that exact moment, a police cruiser pulled up to the curb. Detective Sarah Chen stepped out, walking over with the patient, deliberate pace of someone who'd mediated more than her share of neighborhood disputes. I caught the briefest eye roll she directed at Karen before regaining her neutral expression. Afternoon, Marcus, Sarah said, nodding at me before turning to Karen. Miss Whitfield, I understand there's been a property access issue. Karen immediately jumped into her rehearsed speech, trying to salvage the situation. Officer, thank goodness you're here. This resident has been completely uncooperative with mandatory HOA inspections. Now he's somehow sabotaged my official equipment and is harassing me by filming this without permission. Karen gestured wildly at my phone, her voice cracking. I demand you stop this live broadcast immediately and force him to comply with community regulations. Detective Sarah Chen glanced at my screen, noticing the rising number of viewers and scrolling comments from concerned neighbors. Mr. Rodriguez, she asked, staying neutral but clearly curious about what had led us here, can you explain your side of this situation? Of course, Detective, I replied, steady and direct. Miss Whitfield arrived today with a device that appeared to be attempting rapid cloning on my security system. When I asked for proper authorization, she couldn't provide it. I called emergency dispatch to verify her authority, and during that call, the system automatically disabled her device as a security measure. I paused the stream briefly to bring up the 911 call log on my screen. The dispatcher confirmed that Ms. Whitfield doesn't have legal standing to conduct the kind of inspection she was attempting. Sarah turned her attention to Karen's device. Her practiced eye took in the suspicious custom modifications and total lack of official markings. Miss Whitfield, she asked, do you have any documentation showing this device was legally obtained and authorized for these inspections? The question landed like a slap. Karen's eyes darted between Sarah, me, and the growing virtual crowd still watching the paused stream. The authorization, a broken bar, it's built into the HOA charter. She stammered, I don't need special paperwork to enforce community rules on community property. Sarah shook her head slowly, holding up the disabled device. Ma'am, private residential property isn't the same as community property even if you're HOA president, and this device appears modified in ways that may violate federal and state computer fraud statutes. I resumed the live stream just as Jake Morrison's pickup truck pulled up behind Sarah's cruiser. Jake had been texting me updates all afternoon, following the situation through the neighborhood group chat. As a retired attorney who had clashed with Karen more than once, his arrival added weight to my position. Well, Jake called, stepping out and approaching our group. Looks like someone finally challenged Karen's magic gadget. He nodded at Sarah. Detective Chen, good to see you. I'm guessing the HOA president's latest overreach didn't go as planned? That was the final crack in Karen's composure. This is a conspiracy, she shouted, her voice shrill. You're all working together to undermine legitimate HOA authority. The comments on my live stream surged. Neighbors were sharing stories of similar intimidation attempts by Karen in recent months. Sarah stayed calm, her voice firm but controlled. Ma'am, I need you to calm down. Unless you can provide documentation proving your inspection authority, I'll have to ask you to leave this property. Karen clutched her dead device, her desperation obvious. Boot to broken bar. This equipment is supposed to work anywhere in the community. The vendor guaranteed it would connect to every smart system. Sarah exchanged a glance with me, her expression thoughtful. I could see her mind already ticking toward potential fraud charges against whoever sold Karen the device. "Karen," I said quietly, ending the live stream. "I think it's time we have an honest conversation about what authority you actually have." Jake stepped closer, tablet in hand, his weathered face calm but serious. "Before we go any further, Marcus, there's something you should hear," he said, opening an audio analysis app. Karen stiffened, but Jake continued. "That file you sent me from Karen's device, the supposed authorization recording, it isn't what it seems." He looked meaningfully at Sarah. "Detective, you'll want to hear this too." Karen's face drained of color. "What file? I never gave anyone permission to analyze my equipment." Her protest sounded weak, and even she seemed to realize it. Jake tapped play, and an elderly woman's voice came through the speaker. "This is Eleanor Whitfield authorizing my daughter-in-law Karen to conduct full property inspections throughout Pine Ridge Estates using advanced digital scanning equipment." At first, it sounded convincing, but something about the rhythm and inflection felt subtly off. Jake paused and pulled up a waveform analysis next to a second audio file. "Now, here's a real recording of Eleanor Whitfield from a community meeting 18 months ago," he said, then played a short clip where she spoke about landscaping rules. "Even to my untrained ear, the differences were obvious." The cloned voice had slightly mechanical breathing and strange emphasis on certain syllables. Sarah leaned in, her professional curiosity now fully engaged. "Are you suggesting this authorization was artificially generated?" Jake nodded grimly. "Not just fake, this is advanced high-voice cloning. Someone took real voice samples and synthesized a fraudulent statement." His gaze settled on Karen. "The real question is, who had access to Eleanor's original recordings and the technical skills to create something this sophisticated?" Karen's hands trembled, the last of her composure slipping as the reality of what she was facing finally began to sink in. Karen was shaking now, her voice brittle. "This is ridiculous. Eleanor gave me verbal authorization months ago. If someone recorded it and cleaned up the audio, that's not my fault." But her defense was already crumbling under the weight of evidence Jake kept revealing. "Here's where it gets really interesting," Jake said, his tone calm but relentless as he switched to a financial spreadsheet on his tablet. "I've been following HOA spending since Karen became president, and there are some broken bar curious patterns." He turned the screen toward Sarah and me. $15,000 for digital inspection equipment, another $8,000 for voice authentication systems, and $23,000 for something called a compliance enforcement technology. I felt a wave of disbelief. "Karen, that's almost $50,000 of home money spent on tech designed to break into homeowner systems and create fake authorizations." Sarah's pen was moving quickly across her notebook, her expression turning colder by the second. But Jake wasn't done. "The most revealing part," he went on, "is where this money ended up. Every single purchase was routed through a company called Digital Compliance Solutions. It's a shell corporation, registered in Delaware just 3 months before Karen took over as president." He brought up corporate registration documents, his finger tapping the screen. "And guess who's listed as the primary contact? Karen's lawyer, Robert Hutchins." At that exact moment, a silver BMW pulled up. Hutchins stepped out, looking as if he'd been on the phone all afternoon, but instead of immediately defending Karen, he approached Detective Chen, resignation written across his face. "Detective," he said, offering a polite handshake, "we need to talk about my client's activities." Karen recoiled, her voice cracking. "Robert, what are you doing? You're supposed to defend me, not side with them." Hutchins opened a thick manila folder. "Karen," he said heavily, "I've been cooperating with law enforcement for 3 months. The state bar requires me to report suspected criminal acts by my client, and your use of falsified documents and unauthorized access devices amounts to multiple felonies." He handed the folder to Sarah. "These are copies of the fake authorizations, purchase orders for illegal equipment, and financial records showing where the money was funneled." The silence that followed was electric. Karen's lawyer had quietly been building a case against her while she believed herself untouchable. Sarah flipped through the folder, her brow furrowing deeper as she read. "How long have you known about this?" Mr. Hutchins. I became suspicious, Hutchins explained, when Karen asked me to draft legal justifications to access homeowners' private systems. Then she showed me a fabricated voice authorization. That's when I contacted the district attorney. He looked at Karen, and for a brief moment, there was almost pity in his eyes. I warned you this would end badly, but you believed the technology would protect you. Jake, who had been reading over Sarah's shoulder, let out a low whistle. Marcus, look at this. Karen didn't just go after random homeowners. She targeted the most valuable properties. She tried to create violations that would force sales. He pointed to a handwritten list labeled priority compliance targets. Your house is number 3, right after the Hendersons and that new build on Oak Street. A chill ran through me as I grasped the scale of what Karen had planned. You were trying to force people to sell so you could buy low, weren't you? Karen's voice had lost all its force, now barely more than a whisper. It wasn't supposed to hurt anyone. I just wanted to prove I could run this community. Eleanor never respected me. Broken Bar never believed I deserved to live in her son's house. For the first time, I glimpsed the desperation that had driven her. A lonely attempt to earn validation, but that didn't erase what she had done to her neighbors. Detective Chen closed the folder and looked up, her tone professional and steady. Miss Whitfield, you're under arrest for computer fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. As she read Karen her rights, I noticed the disabled device still lying on my driveway. A small USB drive stuck out from a hidden port I hadn't seen before. Jake, I said quietly, we'll need that USB analyzed too. Sarah collected it as evidence, and soon a digital forensics team arrived. But Jake's expression darkened as he read deeper into Hutchins's documents. Marcus, he said, pulling me aside as the patrol car door closed on Karen, now handcuffed and staring blankly ahead, something else here doesn't add up. Look, he held out a bank statement, certain entries highlighted. Karen has been making monthly payments to Sunset Manor Nursing Home for the last 18 months. I frowned. So, Eleanor lies there, right? Jake shook his head slowly. That's the problem. I checked the public resident directory this morning. Eleanor Whitfield isn't listed as living there. A cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. What are you suggesting, Jake? But even before he answered, the truth was starting to dawn on me, and it was worse than anything we'd uncovered so far. If Eleanor wasn't officially listed as a resident, yet Karen had been making payments, it hinted at something darker than mere financial fraud. Jake lowered his voice, almost a whisper. Marcus, I think we need to see Sunset Manor ourselves, because if Eleanor is theory but not officially registered, it means Karen's been keeping her hidden from any oversight. He glanced at Karen, now silent and handcuffed in the back of the patrol car. And if Karen's been using deepfake technology to fake Eleanor's voice via Broken Bar, how can we be sure Eleanor ever authorized anything herself? About 20 minutes later, Sarah, Jake, and I were stepping into the elegant lobby of Sunset Manor. Plush carpets, fresh flowers, and quiet piano music spoke of money a family's willing to pay for premium care. The administrator, Mrs. Patterson, greeted us with the polished politeness of someone used to fielding delicate questions. But her composure slipped when Sarah quietly showed her badge. I need to see Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield immediately, Sarah said firmly. We have reason to believe she's the victim of financial exploitation and possible unlawful isolation. Mrs. Patterson's face went pale as she turned to her computer. She's in our private care wing, she said hesitantly. But to Broken Bar, her daughter-in-law requested she have no outside contact because of advanced dementia. We've followed those instructions for over a year. Jake and I exchanged a glance. A year of isolation would explain how Karen had operated unchecked. We followed Mrs. Patterson through hallways that grew quieter and more exclusive, until we reached a secluded wing that felt more like a boutique hotel than a nursing home. Eleanor Whitfield's room was at the end, overlooking manicured gardens but notably distant from communal areas. When we stepped inside, what struck me first wasn't frailty, but sharpness. At 96, Eleanor was delicate and thin, but her eyes were bright, alert, and suspiciously amused to see us. She sat reading a hardcover legal thriller, and as she looked up, a faint smile tugged at her lips. Oh my, she said, her voice steady and clear. Unexpected company. You're here about Karen, aren't you? For a moment, None of us spoke. If she truly had dementia, she wouldn't remember recent events, let alone connect them to Karen. Sarah stepped forward, professional but gentle. "Mrs. Whitfield, I'm Detective Chen. We're investigating your daughter-in-law's actions as HOA president. Could you tell us about your living situation here?" Eleanor's expression hardened, and she closed her book carefully on her lap. "Detective, I've been waiting 18 months for someone like you," she said. "Karen told the staff here that I have dementia, that I shouldn't receive mail or phone calls without her supervision. But as you can see, I'm perfectly capable of speaking for myself." She gestured to a corner desk. "I've been keeping notes of everything I've overheard when she visits." Jake moved to the desk, finding a worn notebook tucked behind stacked magazines. "Mrs. Whitfield," I asked gently, "are you saying Karen controlled your communications and medical care against your will?" Eleanor nodded, her voice tightening. "Not just that. She's been using voice recordings to fake my authorization for things I would never have agreed to. 3 months ago, I heard her playing a recording of my voice approving access to bank accounts I didn't even know I had. Hearing it aloud made my skin crawl. Deepfakes weren't just a tool for fraud, they'd become a cage. But what she said next made my stomach turn to ice. She also brought me contracts to transfer my house to her," Eleanor continued, her voice growing colder. "When I refused, she threatened to move me to the psychiatric wing where I'd have no contact with the outside world." Sarah was writing furiously. "Do you have any proof of these threats or the forged authorizations?" Eleanor's eyes glittered with a quiet triumph. "Detective, I may be old, but I'm not helpless." She opened a drawer in her bedside table and pulled out a tiny digital recorder. "I've been secretly recording our conversations, threats, instructions to forge documents, even talk about forcing other homeowners to sell." As Sarah examined the device, Eleanor added, her voice sharp with purpose, "And there's more. Karen isn't working alone. She keeps mentioning someone she calls the consultant as someone who teaches people how to exploit HOA laws for profit. I've heard her talk about other neighborhoods in other states doing the same thing." The scope of it hit me like a wave. What we'd thought was Karen's personal scam was actually part of something larger, organized, methodical, and spreading. Jake was already photographing pages from Eleanor's hidden notebook, dates, phone calls, whispered threats, 18 months of quiet resistance. "Mrs. Whitfield," I said softly, "would you be willing to testify to all of this?" Eleanor's answer came without hesitation, her voice ironclad. "Young man, I've been waiting 18 months to tell the truth about what that woman has been doing. You couldn't stop me if you tried." In that moment, Eleanor Whitfield wasn't just a victim anymore. She'd become the architect of Karen's downfall. And as we prepared for what Eleanor insisted must be a public reckoning, I realized this was bigger than an arrest. It was proof that even in the digital age, patience, courage, and an old woman's determination could still bring down those who thought technology made them untouchable. Over the past 18 months, Eleanor had built the kind of case any prosecutor would envy. And now, as she settled into position before my phone camera, a quiet determination radiated from her. This was the moment she had been preparing for, and we were about to watch Karen's intricate deception crumble in real time. "Before we begin," Eleanor said, shifting slightly so the camera also captured the folder-laden desk behind her, "I want everyone to understand what's truly at stake. This isn't just one woman abusing HOA authority, it's a systematic betrayal of homeowner trust that stretches far beyond Pine Ridge." She lifted the thick folder Jake had been photographing, the papers inside evidence of a conspiracy running through multiple states. As I started the private live stream, the viewer count began climbing almost immediately. Word spread across Pine Ridge's neighborhood forums, and soon people from nearby communities were joining, drawn by rumors of something big unfolding. The comment feed filled with residents sharing their own uneasy encounters with aggressive HOA enforcement. "Good evening, everyone," Eleanor began, her voice steady, carrying the quiet power of someone who had lived nearly a century and seen plenty. "My name is Eleanor Whitfield. For the last 18 months, my daughter-in-law Karen has claimed that I suffer from advanced dementia and can't manage my own affairs. As you can see, that simply isn't true." The audience reaction was immediate and intense. Neighbors who hadn't seen Eleanor in over a year poured into the chat, some confessing they'd assumed she had died, or been moved into memory care. exactly as Karen had wanted them to believe. Eleanor spoke on, each word measured, each revelation deliberate. Karen has been using voice cloning technology to impersonate me, she continued. She's created fake authorizations to access funds I never approved and has stolen over $200,000 from accounts meant for community improvements. She even forged documents claiming I willingly transferred ownership of my home because of alleged mental incapacity. As Eleanor detailed the fraud, Detective Chen quietly moved so she could keep an eye on the patrol car where Karen sat. Through the window, Karen watched the unfolding live stream on Sarah's table, to her expression shifting from disbelief to horror as she realized everything was being broadcast to the people she had deceived. But Eleanor wasn't done. Holding up her small digital recorder, she said, "I want everyone to hear this in Karen's own words." She pressed play. Karen's voice crackled through the feed, confident and chillingly casual. "The key is to make them feel trapped," Karen explained to an unknown accomplice. "We create a violation serious enough to scare them, then offer help to resolve it quickly. People will pay just to avoid a legal fight." The chat exploded in outrage. Residents shared eerily similar stories: sudden violations, mysterious fees, and pressure to sell. The Henderson family themselves joined, confirming in the comments that they had been cornered in exactly this way. The second recording was even more damning. Karen spoke of target neighborhoods in Arizona, Florida, and Texas, places with older homeowners, retirees, and people unfamiliar with HOA rules. "The technology makes it foolproof," Karen bragged, "as long as we keep the illusion of authority." Then came the third and most devastating recording, Karen describing how to trigger fake emergencies. "If we can remotely set off smoke alarms," she told an associate named Peterson, "we can claim fire safety violations and demand immediate entry. Once inside, we'll document minor issues and escalate them into major violations." From my angle, I could see Karen's face drain of color as she listened to her carefully constructed reality collapsing with every word. Eleanor paused, looking straight into the camera. "What Karen didn't know," she said, voice unwavering, "is that 3 months ago, I managed to contact my original attorney. I moved all my assets into an irrevocable trust, beyond her reach. Every document she forged, every authorization she faked, it's all invalid and criminal." The chat lit up with admiration and disbelief. Eleanor had not only survived 18 months of isolation and manipulation, as she had quietly turned the trap back on Karen. Detective Chen stepped into frame, her voice lending official gravity. "Mrs. Whitfield's evidence is now part of a federal investigation. We've identified similar schemes operating in at least 6 other states, coordinated through the same network Karen was working with." A moment later, my phone buzzed a message from dispatch: "Marcus, the FBI is requesting immediate jurisdiction transfer." This just became a federal RICO case. I showed it to Eleanor, and she gave a small, satisfied nod. By now, the live stream had swelled past 500 viewers, with local news stations requesting interviews. Eleanor's words were resonating far beyond Pine Ridge, becoming a beacon for other victims of similar scams. Karen believed she could use technology and fake authority to control us, Eleanor concluded, her voice calm and resolute. But she underestimated the power of patience, documentation, and a community willing to fight back. As the stream ended, Karen's empire didn't just fail, it had been dismantled by the very person she tried hardest to silence. 6 months later, Broken Bar. 6 months after Karen Whitfield's arrest, Pine Ridge Estates had transformed from a neighborhood ruled by HOA tyranny into something few could have imagined: a model of transparent, democratic community governance. The FBI's investigation uncovered far more than even Eleanor had suspected. A sprawling criminal network exploiting homeowners associations across 12 states. Their tactics of forced property sales, bogus violations, and intimidation had generated millions in fraudulent revenue. Locally, the final tally of Karen's crimes was staggering: $347,000 embezzled from HOA funds, wire fraud using falsified documents, unauthorized system access, and conspiracy tied to the larger multi-state operation. Karen's sentencing became a national headline, not only for the scale of her crimes but because the case against her had been built almost entirely by her intended victim. The judge handed down 7 years in federal prison, full restitution, and a lifetime ban from holding any HOA position. Detective Chen texted me afterward. The judge called Eleanor's documentation the most thorough victim-compiled case she'd ever seen, yet the real victory went beyond Karen's punishment. Eleanor's recordings and financial evidence sparked a sweeping FBI investigation that led to 37 arrests across 6 states. The so-called coordinator turned out to be Peterson, a disgraced real estate attorney who had recruited HOA board members into his scheme, teaching them how to manipulate rules and technology to defraud communities. Before Eleanor's testimony exposed them, Peterson's operation had been pulling in over $2 million a year. Today, I found myself sitting in Eleanor's living room at the very home Karen had tried to steal, watching Eleanor sign the final paperwork dissolving Pine Ridge Estates HOA. Instead of reforming the board, Eleanor had proposed something radical. "Marcus," she told me, her voice steady as she signed, "the problem isn't just bad people in charge. It's systems that give too much power to those who are drawn to seek it for the wrong reasons." In place of the HOA, Eleanor, Jake Morrison, and other neighbors had founded the Pine Ridge Community Cooperative. Rather than a board with enforcement powers, it had a rotating council of volunteers, and all decisions were openly discussed and approved by a majority vote on a digital platform. During planning, I'd said, the same technology Karen used to control us can help protect us. Instead of centralizing authority, we can share it. The cooperative's website included live meeting streams, real-time financial updates, and an open voting system so every homeowner could have a say. The idea caught attention quickly. Community organizers, municipal planners, and even local government officials reached out, eager to learn from Pine Ridge's reinvention. Last month, I spoke at a municipal planning conference about using technology to prevent HOA abuse. That talk led to consulting requests from other neighborhoods dealing with similar problems. But the most surprising call came 2 weeks ago from a Colorado community whose residents suspected their HOA president had ties to Peterson's network. The FBI asked for my help analyzing suspected fraudulent devices. "It seems like you've found a new calling," Eleanor remarked as she watched me review the case files. She was right. What began as a personal fight to protect Eleanor's home had evolved into a mission, helping communities defend themselves. Using techniques developed in Pine Ridge, we quickly identified voice cloning software and RFID manipulation devices just like Karen's. More importantly, we taught homeowners how to recognize and challenge illegitimate authority. "You know what's most interesting?" I told Eleanor, showing her an email update from the Colorado community. "They're documenting everything and sharing it with other neighborhoods. It's turning into a network effect, but this time, working for homeowners." Eleanor smiled. Karen thought she could control people by hoarding information, but communities are naturally cooperative when there's transparency. 3 months later, the FBI reached out again. They'd uncovered signs of a new exploitation ring in Florida and asked if I'd consult on proactive prevention, helping other communities recognize the warning signs before abuse took hold. "It's funny how things turn out," I said to Eleanor during one of our weekly coffees. "Karen tried to force you out of your home, and instead, she sparked a movement to protect vulnerable communities across the country." Eleanor lifted her cup in a mock toast to unintended consequences and the danger of underestimating your opponents. She paused, then added with a grin, "Though I never thought I'd become an anti-fraud activist at my age." 6 months later, the Pine Ridge model had been adopted by 17 communities in 8 states. Eleanor's recorded testimony had even become required viewing for several law enforcement training programs. Karen had set out to use technology and authority to manipulate and control her, but in the end, she inspired the creation of a system that protects communities from people like her. If you've ever felt trapped by someone abusing their power, an overbearing HOA, a manipulative neighbor, anyone exploiting their position, remember Eleanor's story. You're not powerless. You can document, expose, and fight back with intelligence, patience, and the support of your community. Your voice matters. And by sharing your experience, you might help others fighting similar battles. If this story inspired you or gave you hope, click like and subscribe to Toja Stories for more true tales where justice, in the end, wins. Thank you for spending part of your day with USA, and if this helped ease your frustration about that last unexpected hoe finding a broken bar, we hope it made you smile. Stay tuned for more stories where stubborn injustice meets a satisfying, dramatic downfall.